She spilled coffee on a billionaire. He fired the manager and bought the restaurant on the spot. But that's not the shocking part. The shocking part is what happened when his mute son spoke for the first time in 8 months to defend her. And the even more shocking part? She was the daughter of the man he supposedly destroyed. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a true story about revenge, forgiveness, and the day one mistake revealed a truth that changed 3 broken lives forever. Stay with me, because the twist in this story will leave you speechless. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you about the day that changed 3 broken lives forever. It happened in London, on a cold November evening when the rain was coming down so hard you could barely see across the street. Picture this, a fancy restaurant called the Sterling Oak. The kind of place where everything costs more than most people make in a week. Crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Tables covered in white cloth so clean they almost glowed. And people dressed in suits that probably cost more than a car. That's where we meet our first character. Her name is Sophie Bennett, and she's 26 years old. But if you looked at her that night, you'd think she was older. Life had been hard on Sophie. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight. Her uniform was clean, but you could see it had been washed so many times the edges were starting to fray. And her eyes had that look of someone carrying the weight of the world. Sophie had been working since 6 in the morning. 2 shifts back to back. Her feet hurt so bad she wanted to cry. But she couldn't cry. She needed this job. Her mom was in the hospital dying from cancer, and the medical bills were piling up higher and higher every single day. The rent was late. The electricity company had sent a final notice. Sophie was drowning, and nobody was throwing her a lifeline. Sophie, table 12 needs coffee. Move it. That was Gerald, the restaurant manager. He was the kind of man who smiled at rich customers and treated staff like dirt under his shoes. Sophie grabbed the silver coffee pot. It was heavy, and her hands were shaking from exhaustion. She walked carefully through the restaurant, trying to be invisible. That's what people like her learn to do in places like this. Be invisible. Don't make eye contact. Just serve and disappear. Then she saw him. Table 12. In the private corner where they always put the most important guests. His name was Daniel Hart, and everyone in London knew who he was. At 38 years old, he was one of the richest men in the country. He owned Hart Pharmaceuticals, a massive company that made medicines. Daniel was tall, handsome in a cold sort of way, with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes like ice. He wore a suit that probably cost £5,000, and he had that look that powerful men have, like the whole world existed just to serve him. But that's not what made Sophie's heart stop. Sitting next to him was a little boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. The child looked exactly like Daniel, the same dark hair, the same features. But his eyes were different. They were sad. So incredibly sad. The boy sat completely still, staring at nothing, while his father typed on his phone, completely ignoring him. Sophie approached the table, her hands trembling. "Your coffee, sir," she whispered. Daniel didn't even look up from his phone. Just kept typing. Sophie began to pour. The coffee streamed into the cup, dark and steaming. She was almost done when it happened. The little boy suddenly reached out for something on the table. His small elbow bumped Sophie's arm. Just a tiny bump, but it was enough. The coffee pot tilted. Hot coffee splashed across the white tablecloth. It spilled onto Daniel's lap, soaking his expensive trousers. Drops splattered onto his Italian leather shoes. Time seemed to stop. The entire restaurant went silent. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversations died mid-sentence. Everyone turned to look. Sophie stood there frozen, the coffee pot still in her hand, watching the dark stain spread across Daniel Hart's lap. Her face went white. This was it. She was fired. And without this job, her mum would die in that horrible public hospital ward. "Oh my God," Sophie gasped. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean." Daniel slowly put down his phone. He looked at his ruined trousers. Then he looked up at Sophie. His face showed nothing. Not anger. Not surprise. Nothing. Like he was made of stone. "You clumsy idiot." Gerald came running from across the restaurant, his face red with rage. He grabbed Sophie's arm so hard it hurt. "Mr. Hart, I apologize from the bottom of my heart. This girl is incompetent. She's fired. Right now. Immediately." Gerald turned on Sophie, and she could see the hatred in his eyes. "Get out. Don't even change out of your uniform. Just get out before I have you arrested." "Please," Sophie begged, tears filling her eyes. Gerald, please. I need this job. My mum is sick. I'll pay for the cleaning. I'll work extra shifts for free. Please don't do this. Get out. Gerald shoved her slightly. That's when something unexpected happened. The little boy, who had been sitting so quietly, suddenly jumped up from his chair. He ran to Sophie and wrapped his small arms around her waist, pressing his face into her apron. No! The boy screamed. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in a long time. Don't hurt her. It was me. I bumped her. Don't hurt her. The restaurant gasped. Sophie looked down at this child she'd never met, who was now defending her with everything he had. But the biggest reaction came from Daniel Hart. He stood up slowly, staring at his son like he was seeing a ghost. His face had gone pale. His hands were shaking. Oliver, Daniel whispered. You spoke. The little boy, Oliver, was crying now, but he didn't let go of Sophie. Don't hurt her, Dad. Please don't hurt her. She's nice. Daniel Hart, the man who could buy and sell people like they were nothing, stood there looking at his son with tears in his eyes. Because Oliver hadn't spoken a single word in 8 months. Not since the day his mother died. The silence in that restaurant was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Everyone was staring at Daniel Hart and his son, Oliver, who was still clinging to Sophie like she was the only safe thing in the world. Daniel walked around the table slowly. He looked at Gerald, the manager, with eyes so cold that the man actually took a step back. Let her go, Daniel said quietly. Gerald released Sophie's arm immediately. Of course, Mr. Hart. She's leaving right now. I wasn't talking about her, Daniel said, his voice dropping even lower. I was talking about you. Gerald blinked, confused. Sir? Daniel pulled out his phone and made a call. Right there, in front of everyone. Thomas? It's Daniel Hart. I'm at the Sterling Oak restaurant. I want you to buy it. Yes, now. I don't care what it costs. Make an offer they can't refuse. He hung up and looked at Gerald. You're fired. I just bought this place, and my first decision as owner is to remove you. You grabbed a woman for an accident caused by my son. You humiliated someone who was just trying to survive. Get out of my sight, and pray I don't make sure you never work in London again. Gerald's face went from red to white. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then practically ran out of the restaurant. Daniel turned to Sophie. Oliver was still holding on to her, and Sophie had instinctively put her hand on the boy's head, gently stroking his hair to comfort him. What's your name? Daniel asked. Sophie, she whispered. Sophie Bennett. Daniel's eyes flickered with something. Recognition, maybe. But he pushed it away. He looked at his son, who was looking up at Sophie like she hung the moon and stars. My son hasn't spoken in 8 months, Daniel said quietly. Not since his mother died. Every therapist in London has tried to help him. Thousands of pounds spent. Nothing worked. But tonight he spoke to defend you. He paused, and Sophie could see him struggling with something inside. You're not a waitress anymore, Daniel said. Pack whatever you need. You're coming with us. I'm offering you a position as Oliver's nanny. You'll live at Hart House. You'll have your own rooms. And I'll pay you £10,000 a month. Sophie's mouth fell open. £10,000? That was more money than she'd make in 6 months of waitressing. I don't understand, she stammered. My son needs you, Daniel said simply. For some reason, you make him feel safe. And I will pay anything to hear my son's voice again. Sophie looked down at Oliver. The little boy was looking up at her with hope in his eyes. Real hope. She thought about her mum in that hospital. About the bills. About the rent. But she also thought about something else. 5 years ago, Daniel Hart had bought her father's small pharmacy company. Bennett's chemist had been in their family for 3 generations. Daniel had shut it down, saying it wasn't profitable enough. 6 months later, her father had drunk himself to death, unable to handle the shame of losing everything. Sophie had hated Daniel Hart for 5 years. He was the villain in her family's story, the monster who destroyed them. And now he was offering to save her mum's life. I'll do it, Sophie said, her voice barely above a whisper. But not for you. For Oliver. And for my mum. Fair enough, Daniel said. He pulled out his phone again. Give me your mother's hospital details. I'll have her transferred to the Royal Marsden Private Hospital tonight. The best cancer specialists in Europe will see her tomorrow morning. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Why would you do that? Because my son spoke for the first time in 8 months to protect you, Daniel said. That's worth more to me than money. The drive to Hart House was like something out of a dream. They rode in a Bentley, the kind of car Sophie had only ever seen in movies. Oliver sat next to her, still holding her hand. He hadn't let go since the restaurant. Daniel sat across from them, watching. He hadn't said a word since they left. Sophie looked out the window as they drove through the wealthy parts of London. Past Hyde Park. Past houses that looked like palaces. Finally, they turned down a private road and stopped at a massive iron gate. Hart House sat on top of a hill, overlooking the city. It was huge, made of gray stone, with towers and gardens that seemed to go on forever. It looked like a castle, but colder somehow. Less welcoming. As they pulled up to the front door, Sophie saw a woman standing at the top of the steps. She was beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way. Black hair, red lips, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Sophie had made in her entire life. "Who's that?" Sophie asked. "Victoria Ashford," Daniel said, and his voice was flat. "My fiancé." Sophie's heart sank. Of course a man like Daniel Hart would have a fiancé who looked like a model. They got out of the car. Victoria walked down the steps, her high heels clicking on the stone. She looked at Daniel with a smile, but when she saw Sophie, the smile vanished. "Daniel, darling," Victoria said, her voice like honey with poison mixed in. "Who is this? Did we hire a new maid?" "This is Sophie," Daniel said. "She's Oliver's new nanny. She'll be living in the East Wing." Victoria's eyes went cold. She looked Sophie up and down like she was inspecting a bug. "A nanny? Daniel, she looks like she just crawled out of a charity shop. Are you sure she's suitable to be around our things?" "She stays," Daniel said firmly. Victoria stepped closer to Sophie. She smelled like expensive perfume and something else. Something mean. "Listen carefully, little waitress," Victoria whispered, quiet enough that Daniel couldn't hear. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm going to be the lady of this house. If you think you can use that brat to get close to Daniel's money, I'll destroy you. I'll make you wish you'd stayed in whatever gutter you came from." Victoria smiled, patted Sophie's cheek in a way that felt like a threat, and walked back into the house. Oliver tugged on Sophie's hand. He looked scared. He pointed at Victoria's back and shook his head hard. Sophie squeezed his hand. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." But as she looked up at that huge, cold house, Sophie wondered what she'd just gotten herself into. The first 2 weeks at Hart House were the strangest of Sophie's life. During the day, it was like living in a fairy tale. Her room was bigger than the entire flat she'd shared with her mum. The bed was so soft she felt like she was sleeping on a cloud. There was even a bathroom with a tub so big you could swim in it. But at night, the house felt different. Cold. Empty. Like a beautiful prison. Sophie spent every day with Oliver. The little boy followed her everywhere. They explored the gardens, finding an old greenhouse covered in vines that nobody used anymore. They played simple games. They read books together. And slowly, Oliver started to talk more. Just little things at first. "Can we go outside?" Or "I'm hungry." But each word felt like a miracle. The staff at Hart House avoided Sophie. They were polite but distant, like they were afraid of something. She realized quickly they were afraid of Victoria. The woman controlled the house like a queen, snapping orders and criticizing everything. Daniel was barely there. He left early for work and came home late, usually going straight to his office. On the rare occasions Sophie saw him, he looked tired. Sad. Like a man trapped in his own life. It was on a Thursday night, 2 weeks after Sophie arrived, that everything changed. Sophie couldn't sleep. The thunder outside was too loud, shaking the windows. She decided to go to the library to find a book. Hart House had a massive library, 2 stories tall, filled with thousands of books that looked like nobody ever read them. She thought she was alone. But as she walked between the shelves, she saw light coming from the fireplace area. And she heard someone talking. It was Daniel. He was sitting in a leather chair, holding a photograph, and he was drunk. There was an empty bottle of whiskey on the table next to him. Sophie tried to back away quietly, but the old floor creaked under her foot. Daniel's head snapped up. "Who's there?" "It's just me," Sophie said, stepping into the light. "I'm sorry. I couldn't sleep." "I'll go." "No," Daniel said. His voice was slurred. "Stay. Sit down. Have a drink with me." "I don't think that's a good idea, Mr. Hart." "Daniel," he said. "Call me Daniel. And sit. That's an order from your employer." Sophie sat carefully in the chair across from him. She could see the photo in his hands now. It was a woman, beautiful and laughing, holding baby Oliver. She looked so happy, so full of life. "Oliver's mother," Daniel said, seeing where Sophie was looking. Catherine. She was everything good in the world. And I killed her. Sophie froze. What? Everyone thinks it was an accident, Daniel continued, taking another drink. Car crash. Drunk driver hit her on a rainy night. That's the official story. But she was only in that car because of me. He looked up at Sophie, and she could see the pain in his eyes. Real, raw pain. We had a terrible fight that night, Daniel said. I just bought this company. Bennett's Chemist. A small pharmacy chain. The owner had been running it into the ground, stealing from the pension fund to cover his gambling debts. I bought it to save the jobs, to pay out the workers. Sophie felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. What did you say? Bennett's Chemist, Daniel repeated. The owner, Robert Bennett, had destroyed everything. But Catherine didn't see it that way. She thought I was being cruel. She said I'd lost my soul, that all I cared about was money and power. Sophie could barely breathe. Her father. Daniel was talking about her father. She took Oliver and left, Daniel continued, not noticing Sophie's reaction. Said she was going to her sister's house. 2 hours later, the police called. She was dead. And I signed the papers to close Bennett's the next morning. I was angry at the world, so I destroyed that company. I fired everyone. I was cruel because I was broken. My father, Sophie whispered, tears streaming down her face. Robert Bennett was my father. Daniel went completely still. The drunken haze cleared from his eyes instantly. He stared at Sophie like he was seeing her for the first time. Bennett, he repeated. Sophie Bennett. Oh God. He killed himself, Sophie said, her voice shaking with anger and pain. 3 months after you closed the company. He lost everything. He couldn't face us. So he hanged himself in our garage. My mum found him. Daniel stood up, swaying slightly. He walked to a desk in the corner and unlocked a drawer. He pulled out a thick folder and dropped it on the table between them. Read it, he said quietly. Sophie opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were police reports, bank statements, audit records. And there, in the middle, was a letter in her father's handwriting. I have failed everyone. I took the pension money to pay my gambling debts. I lied to my family. I lied to my workers. Daniel Hart is buying the company to pay them what I stole. He's covering for me so my family won't know what I did. God forgive me. The letter was dated 2 days before Daniel bought the company. Sophie read it 3 times, each word cutting deeper. Her father hadn't been a victim. He'd been a thief, a gambler. And Daniel Hart, the man she'd hated for 5 years, had actually tried to save everyone. He'd let the world call him a monster to protect her father's memory. I'm sorry, Daniel said quietly. I should have found you. Should have made sure you and your mother were okay. I was drowning in my own grief, and I let you suffer. That's on me. Sophie looked up at him through her tears. 5 years of hatred crumbled in an instant. They were both just broken people, carrying guilt that wasn't entirely theirs to carry. I hated you, Sophie whispered. For so long, I hated you. You had every right to, Daniel said. They sat there in the silence, 2 damaged souls finally seeing each other clearly. Then they heard a sound. A small gasp from the doorway. They both turned. Victoria was standing there, her phone out, recording everything. Well, well, Victoria smiled, her voice dripping with venom. This is perfect. The billionaire and the daughter of the thief he destroyed. Wait until my lawyer sees this. Wait until the press hears this story. She turned and walked away, her laughter echoing through the house. Daniel looked at Sophie. For the first time since they'd met, she saw real fear in his eyes. She's going to destroy us both, he whispered. Sophie couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her huge bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Victoria had that recording. She would use it to destroy Daniel, to take his money, and probably to throw Sophie out onto the street. But it wasn't just about the money anymore. Sophie kept thinking about Oliver. That sweet, broken little boy who was just starting to heal. What would happen to him if Victoria got her way? The next morning, Daniel called Sophie to his study. When she walked in, she found him standing by the window, looking out at the gray London sky. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Sophie, he said, turning to face her. I need to tell you something. I know, Sophie said. Victoria is going to blackmail you. Yes, Daniel said. She wants half of everything. The company, the houses, the money. And she wants custody of Oliver. Sophie felt sick. Custody? But she hates him. I've seen the way she looks at him. I know, Daniel said quietly. But British law is complicated. We're engaged. We've been together for 2 years. Her lawyers will argue that Oliver needs a mother figure. He walked over to his desk and sat down heavily. I've been a fool, Sophie. Victoria was Catherine's best friend. After Catherine died, Victoria was there. She helped with the funeral. She listened when I grieved. I thought maybe I could learn to love again. But I was wrong. Why did you propose to her? Sophie asked. Because I was lonely, Daniel admitted. Because this house is too big and too empty. Because Oliver needed a mother, and I'm a terrible father. His voice cracked. I thought I could make it work. But Victoria doesn't love me. She loves what I can give her. Sophie sat down across from him. What are you going to do? Daniel looked at her, and something in his eyes changed. It wasn't the cold look anymore. It was determination. I'm going to fight, he said. For Oliver. For the truth. For what's right. That night, Daniel called a family meeting. He gathered everyone in the dining room. Victoria, Sophie, and his head of security, a serious man named James. Victoria walked in looking smug, dressed in white like she'd already won. Daniel, darling, she purred, sitting at the head of the table. Have you thought about my proposal? Half of everything, or I release that video. Your choice. Daniel stood at the other end of the table. He looked calm. Too calm. Victoria, he said. I have a better idea. How about you leave this house with nothing, and I don't send you to prison? Victoria laughed. Prison? For what? I haven't done anything illegal. James, Daniel said. The security man placed a tablet on the table in front of Victoria. He pressed play. The video that showed up wasn't the one Victoria had recorded. It was security footage from inside the house. The date stamp showed it was from 3 months ago. On the screen, Victoria was in Daniel's office, copying files from his computer onto a USB drive. The footage showed her taking documents, photographing confidential papers, sending messages on her phone. Corporate espionage, Daniel said calmly. You've been selling my company's research to my competitors. New drug formulas that cost millions to develop. You sold them to Rothwell Pharmaceuticals for £2 million. The money is sitting in a bank account in the Cayman Islands under your mother's name. Victoria's face went white. That's fake. You edited that. We have the bank records, James said, placing a folder on the table. We have the emails. We have everything. But that's not all, Daniel continued. He pressed another button on the tablet. This time it was audio. Victoria's voice, sharp and cruel, echoing through the speakers. You useless little brat. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Your precious daddy doesn't care about you anyway. He wishes you died instead of your mother. Sophie gasped. It was Victoria talking to Oliver. You could hear the little boys sobbing in the background. That was from last month, Daniel said, his voice hard as steel. When I was away on business. You locked my son in a closet for 4 hours because he accidentally spilled juice on your dress. Victoria stood up, her chair falling backward. You can't prove any of this. Those recordings could be anyone. The police are outside, Daniel said. They've been listening to everything. You're going to be arrested for corporate espionage, extortion, and child abuse. At that moment, the dining room doors opened. 2 police officers walked in. Victoria Ashford, one of them said. You're under arrest. Victoria screamed as they handcuffed her. You'll regret this, Daniel. I'll tell everyone about her father. About the gambling. About everything. Go ahead, Daniel said calmly. I released the audit files myself this morning. The whole story is already public. Your father was a thief who tried to cover his tracks, Sophie, but I paid back every worker who lost their pension. The world knows the truth now. Victoria was dragged out of the room, still screaming threats. When the door closed behind her, Sophie realized she was shaking. Daniel walked over and sat next to her. Are you all right? He asked gently. You released the truth about my father, Sophie said. Everyone will know he was a criminal. Everyone will know he was a desperate man who made mistakes, Daniel corrected. And that I tried to help. I'm tired of secrets, Sophie. Tired of lies. The truth might hurt, but it's better than living in darkness. Sophie nodded slowly. Then something occurred to her. How did you know about Victoria? About the espionage? Daniel almost smiled. I suspected for months. So I set up cameras everywhere. I was gathering evidence. Last night, when she recorded us, she gave me the excuse I needed to act. You played her, Sophie realized. I protected my family, Daniel said. He reached out and took her hand. You and Oliver. You're my family now. And I will never let anyone hurt you again. Sophie looked at him and saw something she never expected to see. Love. Real, honest love. 3 months later, London was covered in snow. The city looked like a Christmas card, all white and sparkling under the streetlights. Sophie stood in front of the mirror in her room at Hart House, adjusting her dress. It was simple but beautiful, deep blue velvet that made her eyes shine. Her mum had helped her pick it out last week. Her mum. Sophie still couldn't believe it sometimes. Sarah Bennett was in remission. The cancer was gone. She'd moved into the guest house at Hart House, laughing and smiling again, looking 10 years younger. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," Sophie called. Oliver walked in, dressed in a little suit, his hair combed neatly. He was grinning from ear to ear. "Sophie, Dad says it's time," Oliver said. His voice was strong now, full of joy. He talked constantly these days, making up for all the months of silence. "Everyone's waiting." Sophie's heart swelled with love for this little boy. He'd changed so much. He laughed now. He played. He was starting school next month, excited to make friends. "How do I look?" Sophie asked, giving him a spin. "Like a princess," Oliver said seriously. Then he held out his hand. "Will you come with me?" Sophie took his hand, and together they walked downstairs. Hart House had been transformed. The cold, empty halls were now filled with lights and flowers and warmth. There were only 20 people there, all people who mattered. Sarah, glowing with health. James, the security man, who'd become a good friend. A few of Daniel's colleagues who'd proven to be genuine. Oliver's new therapist, who'd helped him so much. They gathered in the library, the room where Sophie and Daniel had first shared their truths. The fireplace was burning bright, casting a warm glow over everything. And there was Daniel, standing by the fire, wearing a dark suit, his eyes fixed on Sophie as she entered. He looked different now. The ice was gone from his eyes. He smiled more. He laughed with Oliver. He'd started working less, spending time at home, being present. Sophie walked toward him, her heart pounding. This wasn't a wedding. Not yet. They'd agreed to take things slow, to build something real and solid, not rushed by drama or trauma. This was something else. Something they'd created together. Daniel took Sophie's hands. 3 months ago, he said, speaking to everyone, I was a ghost. I was going through the motions of life, but not really living. I'd lost my wife. I'd lost my connection to my son. I'd lost myself. He looked at Sophie. Then this woman spilled coffee on me. Everyone laughed. Sophie felt tears prick her eyes. She came into my house, into my life, and she brought the light back, Daniel continued. She gave me my son's voice. She gave me the courage to face the truth. She gave me hope. He turned to Oliver. Son, come here. Oliver bounded over, standing between them. Oliver, Daniel said, kneeling down to his level. I've been a terrible father. I was so lost in my own pain that I forgot you were hurting too. But Sophie showed me how to be better. She showed both of us how to heal. He looked up at Sophie. So today, I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. Today, I'm asking you something more important. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. But when he opened it, there wasn't a ring inside. There were 3 keys. These are the keys to Hart House, Daniel said. One for you, one for me, one for Oliver. Because this isn't my house anymore. It's our home. All of us together. Sophie couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They streamed down her face as Daniel stood up. Sophie Bennett, he said softly. Will you build a life with us? No secrets, no lies, just truth and love and family. Sophie looked at Daniel. Then at Oliver, who was looking up at her with hope shining in his eyes. Then at her mum, who was crying happy tears in the front row. Yes, Sophie whispered. 1,000 times yes. The room erupted in applause. Oliver threw his arms around both of them, and they stood there in a group hug, the 3 of them, a family born from broken pieces but whole now. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Sophie found Daniel in Oliver's room. Oliver was asleep, clutching his wooden wolf toy, a peaceful smile on his face. Daniel was sitting on the edge of the bed, just watching his son breathe. Sophie sat next to him. What are you thinking? She whispered. I'm thinking about second chances, Daniel said quietly. I thought my life was over when Catherine died. I thought I'd destroyed too much, hurt too many people, lost too much to ever be happy again. He took Sophie's hand. But maybe that's not how life works. Maybe we get broken so we can be put back together stronger. Maybe the mistakes we make, the pain we go through, maybe it's all leading us to where we're supposed to be. Sophie leaned her head on his shoulder. Your wife, she said gently. Catherine. Tell me about her. Daniel smiled, a sad but genuine smile. She would have liked you. She was fierce like you. She didn't let me get away with anything. She called me out when I was being cold or cruel. I'm not trying to replace her, Sophie said. I know, Daniel said. And that's why this works. You're not Catherine. You're Sophie. And I'm not the man I was when she was alive. I'm someone new. Someone better, I hope. He turned to look at her. We're all someone new now, built from the ashes of who we used to be. Sophie thought about that. She thought about the scared, exhausted waitress she'd been 3 months ago. About the bitter, angry daughter who'd hated a man she didn't really know. That person was gone now. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who'd learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing not to let the past destroy your future. I love you, Sophie said. The words came out easily, naturally, like they'd been waiting to be said. Daniel's breath caught. He turned to her fully, cupping her face in his hands. I love you too. I didn't think I could love again. But you made me remember what it feels like to be alive. They kissed there in Oliver's room, with the nightlight glowing softly and the snow falling outside the window. It wasn't a kiss from a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real. 1 year later, they did get married. In the old greenhouse that Sophie and Oliver had discovered, now restored and filled with flowers. Sarah walked Sophie down the aisle. Oliver was the ring bearer, talking a mile a minute about how he got to wear a bow tie. Daniel cried when he saw Sophie in her wedding dress. Not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. Gratitude for second chances. For broken things that could be fixed. For the day a scared waitress had spilled coffee on his lap and changed everything. So that's the story. The story of how one mistake, one moment of clumsiness, led to the healing of 3 broken hearts. Because sometimes the worst moments in our lives are actually the beginning of our best ones. Sometimes the people we think are our enemies are actually our salvation. Sometimes forgiveness is the bravest thing we can do. Daniel thought he was saving Sophie. But really, she saved him. She saved Oliver. And in the process, she saved herself. They learned that families aren't just born. They're built. Piece by piece, day by day, with patience and love and the courage to face the truth. And they learned that home isn't a place. It's the people who stand by you when everything falls apart. The people who see you at your worst and choose to stay anyway. The people who hold your hand in the darkness and help you find the light. Hart House isn't cold anymore. It's filled with laughter and warmth and love. Oliver has friends from school who come over to play. Sarah has her garden where she grows roses. Daniel works from home 2 days a week, so he never misses Oliver's school events. And Sophie finally understands what her father wrote in that last letter. God forgive me. He wasn't just asking for forgiveness for what he'd done. He was asking for forgiveness for giving up, for not believing that broken things could be fixed. But Sophie knows better now. She knows that broken things can be beautiful when they're put back together with love. So if you're going through something hard right now, if you feel broken or lost, or like you've made too many mistakes to ever be happy, remember this story. Remember that second chances are real. That forgiveness is powerful. That love can grow in the most unexpected places. Remember that sometimes the worst day of your life is actually the first day of your new life.